All right, just before we get started, I want to tell you about the Shopify app I think a lot of growing brands should know about, and it's called Plitix. Now, Plitix is a multi-store AI bulk editor that makes managing product content on Shopify actually scalable. Now, after 6 years inside Shopify and running my own brand, I really wish that a tool like this had been around back then. Because once your catalog gets serious, Shopify alone starts to break down. Like, try a simple find and replace across your product descriptions. You'll end up exporting to a spreadsheet, making the change, and then importing back just to update one phrase. And multiply that across translations and variants and even missing meta fields, and then you've burned a week. Especially if you've got like 1,000 or more SKUs or you're adding 50 or more products a month. Now, I've known about Plitix for a while, but I didn't think much of them for Shopify. But recently I took another look and they're now laser focused on Shopify specific problems and helping brands adopt what they call content-led growth. And that means like better product content drives more discoverability and better sales across Shopify, marketplaces, and the incredibly important and emerging world of AI shopping. And their credentials in the ecosystem are real too. They are the #1 product information management software, or PIM, on G2, 5 years running, and are now ranked the #4 for best commerce software this year alone. So if your team is losing hours on manual product edits, grab Plitix app for free in the Shopify App Store, or you can head on over to plitix.com/fastlane. That's PLYTIX.com/fastlane. All right, let's jump into today's episode.
You're listening to E-commerce Fastlane, the podcast show to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company, powered by Shopify. Listen to real conversations with partners and subject matter experts as they share proven practical strategies, platforms, and the best Shopify apps to help you accelerate your business. The time is now for you to improve efficiencies, grow revenue, profit, and lifetime customer loyalty. Please welcome your host, startup founder, and strategic advisor, Steve Hutt.
Well, hey there. Welcome back to E-commerce Fastlane. I am your host. Now, today we're going to talk a lot about how to run your store, a little bit of a paradigm shift, more about profit of your revenue. And the thing is that, and I think we're going to learn about what actually takes, when your costs are climbing, how do you think about a profit first type business? And I think, if you ever look at your revenue, you can see a lot of times that it in a lot of cases it's growing, but profit never really seems to show up kind of like maybe where you expected it to be. And I think a lot of people, I've heard some of these horror stories. It's interesting. People are stitching together a lot of, either spreadsheets to kind of figure a little bit of it out. And I'm sure there are a lot of people listening say that's kind of like how you run your business is having some kind of like master spreadsheet. We're going to learn about maybe getting into like real profit numbers, like by order, and finding like kind of where the money is leaking. I think there are a lot of leaky buckets when it comes to true profitability of a business. And I think getting straight answers, I think is probably the most important thing. People just don't have a lot of time, but they want to get to the numbers and they want to get to an answer, maybe without living inside a dashboard all day. I think that's the unfortunate challenge that a lot of founders and marketers find themselves. They're stuck in a dashboard. My guest today, I believe, has solved a lot of these problems. His name is Thomas Gleeson, and he's the co-founder of a company called StoreHero, and they're at storehero.ai. He spent mega years, like me, inside Shopify. He was a merchant success manager before building StoreHero. And what StoreHero is, now I'm going to hear it in his own words in a moment, but it really, from what I can see, it pulls like sales, marketing, and costs all into, as he refers to it, as a kind of a profit first view. And I think they're one of the few people that have shipped this sort of like profit focused kind of process. And they even have a new Cloud connector now, which I want to dig into in a few minutes. So my hope, and we're going to learn more about why profit really does beat revenue at any stage, wherever you're at. And I think a lot of stores are losing margin when they don't really know what to do or how to fix it. So Thomas is going to help us figure that all out. So Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Steve. That was a fantastic intro. I might have to get you on the sales team at some point. Hello, everyone. Thank you very, very much for having me on, Steve. Really looking forward to this one. As you mentioned, we kind of shared a bit of common ground
Uh-huh.
during our time both as MSMs at Shopify, and what an amazing experience that was. For
Hmm.
those of you listeners who maybe aren't familiar with me, I'm one of the co-founders at a company called StoreHero. And well, we help e-commerce brands understand where they're actually making profit and what they could actually do about it to improve their numbers.
Yeah, this is amazing. Now, you actually grew up. I did a little bit of, I kind of creeped on your LinkedIn profile and did a little bit of, I found out that you had a kind of family business.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think what's interesting is that you have this family direct to consumer business and then kind of pivoted over into into the Shopify world.
Mhm.
And then obviously you saw something in that family business and Shopify that allowed you to go on and build Store Hero.
Yeah, it's actually quite a really organic story, to be completely honest with you. So my mother has a e-commerce business still going today. It's wowwe.ie. It's personalized baby gifts, christening gifts, that kind of thing. And that business actually was set up in 2004 as ecom first, which in the west of Ireland, for your listeners, that's where my accent is coming from Ireland. West of Ireland, e-commerce 2004 wasn't exactly a huge portion of retail revenue. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But, it was an amazing and formative experience for me. We grew up hearing about broken checkouts and bounce rates and, learning about hero images and samples, all this kind of thing. And that business actually grew for, I think, 11 years SEO only, which is, a bit of a pipe dream for anybody running e-commerce today.
Right.
Now, I started running Facebook ads back in 2015, and the issue I actually ran into wasn't anything to do with an algorithm or a CPA. It was my dad. My dad is an accountant, a bookkeeper, and he would have ran the numbers for our business a little bit. And I quickly ran into a trap where, and this is actually quite reminiscent of a lot of e-commerce businesses, where the bookkeeper, the accountant, is the one making the financial decisions, and the founder is often quite marketing led and very good at products. But they're often very, very different people, and trying to get those two people on the same page, that was certainly a challenge for me. And what it kind of forced me to do was build this spreadsheet on a weekly basis to
Mhm.
show him that as I was spending money, I wasn't just driving more revenue, but that it was actually profitable. And that was a really painfully manual experience, but one I learned an awful lot from.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you know what's interesting, and I always like to do these contrast and compare. And
Yeah.
Shopify, clearly has analytics. People obviously have the GA4 tag installed,
Mhm.
and I know that there's been lots of conversation about why there is a disparity between Shopify's analytics, Google Analytics, sometimes even comparing to a lot of these paid social channels. Everyone's taking attribution for different things at different times and different windows. Not all the sessions are being accounted for. Like, what's your thought here around the Store Hero and kind of how it's doing its analytics and how it shares data to a merchant to make decisions versus all these other kind of like separate systems that are all kind of firing on their own?
Sure. So the first thing is, you look at how most businesses quantify success on a weekly basis, and typically it's log into Shopify sales, are they red or the green, up or down, and then we log into Meta and Google and we look at the return on ad spend figures. Both of those are extremely useful metrics, by the way. Your sales figures are obviously paramount within Shopify, and how you're getting on within the ad platforms obviously incredibly important. The challenge I see is more so around how they make decisions. So ROAS, revenue, MER, that kind of business level ROAS doesn't necessarily tell them if they're actually profitable. You can have a great ROAS and still be losing a ton of money. I've personally seen it hundreds of times.
Mhm.
It's just so extremely subjective in that like a three ROAS is phenomenal for one business and absolutely terrible for another business as well. So
Right.
what we're ultimately trying to do is say to businesses, the signal that you build the business around is ultimately the business that you're going to build. And if you are a business that has aspirations to be growing and growing profitably and sustainably, ensuring that you are monitoring and tracking profit on a weekly basis is absolutely incredibly important, to grow. And every e-commerce business that's doing 7, 8, 9 figures that is profitable, understanding that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is paramount. And it is something that they're tracking every day. just to answer your question more directly, how are we looking at that?
Mhm.
So essentially, we built a profit intelligence system that will bring in, you to your point, the Shopify data, all the marketing channels that you have. But the missing point in all this is actually sometimes we don't think about product costs, packing, shipping,
Yeah.
transaction,
Mhm.
fulfillment, return fees. I kind of call these things little paper cuts. They come out of every single order that you fulfill.
Yeah.
And that's not captured in your Facebook or your Google ROAS.
No, that's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So where do you think a lot of and so that's some of the leaks, I guess, that I was thinking of
Sure.
that people don't necessarily account for the true profitability. So, but maybe across a lot of the brands that you work with, like where does this, potentially this profit leaking, where does it come from that maybe founders never really understand it very well because they're not, it's just, once again, they're thinking about ROAS and revenue and their marketing efficiencies.
Yeah, and maybe just even before I dive into that, I don't have like a massive problem with ROAS in terms of I think it's actually a phenomenal metric, directionally very interesting, correct, and like even for our own family business, I still track it every day. Yeah, I suppose it's the prism in which I put it in the decision making process for our business and for all of our customers' business is where I maybe have the issue. It isn't a North Star to run your business if
Right.
your aspiration is to be profitable. And I think that's the conflation that we need to break ourselves out of. Whether you have an MTA solution in place, whether you are just tracking in-platform ROAS, they're all interesting, all great metrics to track, but they are not a metric to build your business on, for all the reasons we're probably going to dive into here. So just to answer your question, in terms of where the leaks happen, it's probably twofold. Like there is the leaks, and predominantly it is happening in, not necessarily understanding your numbers with all of those variable costs that I just mentioned going in.
Yeah.
But the other thing is probably like somewhat analysis paralysis and opportunity cost, because we're making commercial decisions based on marketing data. And while it is like I always say to people, like e-commerce has evolved from, if we go back to pre 2022, Facebook ads were a hell of a lot cheaper, and it was a marketing game. You could be good at products, you could be good at marketing, you could kind of sell anything on Facebook. You could sell
Yeah.
used bottles of water if you want, but that
Hmm.
has changed. Ad costs have gone up. Inflation has driven operating expense to run a business up pretty tremendously as well. And therefore you can't, it's kind of evolved from a numbers or a finance game wrapped in a marketing cloak. And that's what I see is the biggest change in terms of the brands that are being successful today. They are looking at it, they're obviously working extremely hard at their marketing, but they build an underlying financial and margin model first, and then they make sure that the marketing needs to work in around those parameters.
I see. So my other question then I have then, because I read on your website and that you talk a bit, and I think you've done this like on LinkedIn too. You're pretty bold, and I agree with it because I've read some of the case studies. But you're telling founders right now that you can see between a 10 and 20% lift in what's kind of referred to as contribution margin, usually in the first, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. Like what actually changes in how they run their business so that a brand can actually see a 10 or 20% lift in their margin?
Sure. And even just before I kind of explain that, just you mentioned contribution margin. I just don't
Yeah.
want to gloss over that number. It's a really,
Fair
really
enough.
important one.
Uh-huh.
Essentially, your contribution margin is your profit after your marketing and all of your COGS. So essentially, as an ecom operator, I want to maximize that number. That
Right.
is the number I'm gunning for. It's not necessarily sales or revenue for me. I want to maximize the most amount of profit after my marketing. And whether that's spending more or less, that's what I need to do. So
Okay.
how did they get there in the first kind of 60 to 90 days, increase in profit by 10 to 20%? Like often there's very, very easy opportunities in there in terms of we plug it in a brand for the first time. Typically, when we do onboarding calls, we know an awful lot more about the business within 10 minutes than often the founders do. And that's no shade to anybody else. We're just looking at businesses through a financial lens
Right.
all the time. And sometimes it can be something as simple and easy as dialing up spend. You're actually massively overly efficient. We have founders that are chasing the highest return and efficiency rate possible. That's not how you grow a big and profitable business. It's often trying to get the balance between, are we at that sweet spot? Are we spending the max amount of money to drive the max amount of profit? Or are we just trying to maximize efficiency at the expense of profit? So understanding that where we sit on that curve is often a really easy lever to pull. Sometimes that's increasing budgets, sometimes it's pulling it back. The other piece is often just stuff that's going wrong in the business that we didn't know. And just a quick couple of examples, like we have a very detailed breakdown on a SKU on an order level. We often come across brands that maybe have discount codes live that they weren't aware of. There could be shipping incorrectly priced to Germany. We may not have taken into account that we now pay duties on our orders to Australia or vice versa. And there's so many different little margin paper cuts that need to be taken into account. And you know yourself, Steve, e-commerce is so dynamic, it's changing all the time. Not everybody is keeping up to that with that every single day of the week. And therefore there often is just, usually 3 to 10 really simple margin improvements that can be made pretty quickly and easily. And then the onus is on the founder to go and actually make them happen. But as soon as we kind of have a call, we can outline what they are and what the potential impact will be. People are generally pretty motivated to get to work.
Yeah, this is amazing. So I know that the StoreHero platform, based on my research, is that like there's a lot of parts to it, and I think people can go in a mindset of kind of like crawl, walk, run. You don't need to fully utilize the whole entire platform all at once. I think some more advanced operators, upwards of 5 to 10, maybe even 50 million, they can see full value in it just because they have the business acumen and processes in place, but they just don't have the framework. You have all the framework for all the divisions inside an e-com brand. One of the things that I thought was interesting, for sure, like the sales and profit reporting that's available, I think is quite interesting, and that's I don't say table stakes, but it's interesting how you have like the profit side of it. But what I would thought was quite interesting are a lot of businesses, and especially C-suite, like founders, they try to think about more in QBRs and like quarterly. What are we doing next? What's our forecast? What are our goals? Where are we working towards? Can you talk a little bit about that part of the platforms? I think goals and forecasting is quite interesting that you can forward think and statistically offer some insights as to where the business is actually headed and or not, and then course correct as needed.
Yeah, more than happy to take that one, Steve. You know, we have a forecasting product in StoreHero. It's funny, it wasn't something that we actually built because people were screaming for it.
Right.
It came, which is kind of, people are probably listening thinking, why did you build it? No, it came to us because early on we started having trouble. And I think a lot of founders who are listening to this could probably empathize with this, in that you log into your dashboard and your reports and, you've 50 million different acronyms that all mean different things on a dashboard. They're all going red and green. And, I'm an ecom founder. I'm dealing with support tickets, inventory, customer service. Like, I don't have time to upskill and understand exactly what all these 100 acronyms mean and why they're important to my business. So it was kind of born out of necessity. We needed a mechanism to hold each number in StoreHero accountable around a commercial goal for the business. So essentially, as a founder, I want to log in and I want to see what's working and what's wrong. And I want to work on what's wrong and do more of what's right. I don't necessarily want to log in and have to spend a full day trying to figure out, is this number, what does that even mean? How does that relate to the number on the other page? So it was honestly born out of that. So essentially, what you do when you log in now, and it's kind of interesting how we've aligned the forecasting with the profit first approach to a certain extent. So instead of so how a lot of forecasts will work for a lot of e-commerce brands out there is they will pick a revenue target for the year and they'll pick a marketing budget and then pick their costs, and profit is whatever profit is. It's never really a target at the start of the year. We kind of thought that was wrong. Just for some context, a good e-commerce business today generates about 8 to 12% net profit. And it's a very cash intensive business. So the margins are pretty thin, to be completely honest. So it doesn't make sense to be consistently optimizing towards revenue targets in a game that's quite thin margin.
Right.
So we kind of flipped it on its head and we broke it down to 4 key areas. So we don't ask businesses for their marketing budget. We think that's the biggest variable that you shouldn't necessarily be. You shouldn't set a marketing budget. You should be working backwards from 4 key things you know to be true. And what are they? You know your net sales target for the year. If you don't, you definitely should know that number. The next one is your cost of goods. This is the one we see everybody get wrong. And often when we hook a brand up, this is the one they say, this isn't correct. So your cost of goods for an e-commerce business is your products, it's your packing, your shipping, your transaction, 3PL fees, all bundled together as one. So it's not just your product cost, it's all those extra variables.
Yeah.
Next piece is your fixed costs that you need to cover. So payroll, rent, insurance fees, software, whatever else. And the last piece, brands usually know the operating costs as well. The last piece, which they don't know, and I love asking founders this question, is what's your profit target for the year?
Mm.
You're a
Mhm.
founder, you've set this business up to be profitable, and you've no target as to what that needs to be at the end of the year. It kind of is what it is once we get to the end of December. And for us, we're forcing people to pick a profit target. And once we have those four key pieces of information,
Mhm.
it shows you what your marketing budget can be, the efficiency rate that you can run at, and it also does a quick check of the last 2 to 3 years to see, does that efficiency rate and budget actually even stack up, or are you being overly ambitious in terms of what you think you can do? So we're helping founders create a profit first forecast that aligns with their commercial and seasonality goals.
I see. And I guess it comes back to the old acronym. I don't know how it actually goes, but what you don't track, you can't affect. So,
100%. 100%.
oh man, that's
But
crazy.
yeah, to your point, it was just born out of a necessity. People now log in, they can just see good, bad, ugly,
Yeah.
accounting for seasonality and commercial goals. To be honest, it was probably one of the best features we ever launched.
I know. I saw it to be notable, and it's something that's always on my mind too. I'm thinking about that, and I think a lot of founders would never
Yeah.
really ask a yearly profit target. They wouldn't do that. They always talk about revenue, and you use a lot of the other acronyms that you're talking about. I think are important. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, sometimes some business can have a 4x ROAS, but they're barely breaking even. And you're saying a good business is running a sub 8% total gross margin. Um, it's pretty scary. So the other thing I want to talk about too, because I think obviously AI is on a lot of people's
Yeah.
radar, and I think it's interesting where a lot of people are using different sorts of tools. And I see I recently you connected, and I think there's two parts to the platform that I want to talk about. I see you have an MCP server now going over to Claude, and then you can work from within Claude, can then bring in data or pull data out of StoreHero
Mhm.
more, as like a chat solution and query, and then showing artifacts and things like that. I think that's really neat. I do want to talk about that in a second. But you do also have like AI insights. So you're clearly utilizing like a few different large language models to understand all of the data that you're bringing in to your data warehouse from within StoreHero. So you have these AI insights built into the platform for those people that maybe don't want to use an external tool like Claude connected to StoreHero. So can you talk about maybe what AI Insights is as a solution, and then we'll kind of transition over to this new MCP server that you've connected.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so we just spoke about the forecast there, right? We built the forecast out, and the forecast goes deeper than just showing you financials, like are your sales up or down, blah blah blah.
Right.
It goes deeper to show you like new customers, are we on track, off track, Klaviyo revenue, etc., etc. So we put that in front of customers last year, and they were really happy with it. But the next challenge we got and the pushback we got was, okay, this is great. Now I know I've missed my new customer target by 23% last week. What am I going to do about it, and why did this happen? So, obviously it's an extension. People don't want to do the work. We have all the data. Let's make it as easy for them as possible to understand exactly what went wrong, support it with data, and ultimately give them next steps as to what they can do. So the AI insights in the platform essentially triangulate between the forecast, as of to, okay, last week, sales targets, revenue targets, all the way down to like bounce rate targets, conversion rate targets, AOV targets, new customers. It triangulates between the forecast as to see what should have happened versus what actually happened. And then it's going to break it down into two key areas of what's working and what could be improved. Tell you, of the metrics that worked well, of the metrics that didn't work well, why you hit or missed that target, backing it up with the data that supports that specific number. As an example, if you miss new customers, it would show you, your Meta spend, your Google spend, your bounce rates, your efficiency rates, your CPMs, all that kind of thing. And even like your new customer AOV and gross margin, discount rates, that kind of thing. So it contextually understands the numbers that are related to the miss on new customers
Mm.
within StoreHero, and then we'll give you a baseline recommendations. Example, on the new customer front, you missed by 20%. Think about maybe increasing that discount code. Think about bundling these two products together. Think about dialing up this meta ad campaign. You're much more efficient than you probably need to be.
I get you. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it is. It's good. It's definitely like a very easy and like it's a really easy layer for anybody who's maybe a little bit apprehensive about AI at the moment in terms of their own abilities to get set up and running. There's no setup needed for that. It just works out of the box.
Right. So then now we flip over to this MCP server. Maybe explain to those that are listening what an MCP server actually is, and then why you have created one and connected now from Claude, either with Claude Code or Cowork or right from within chat over to StoreHero. So let's talk about that and then what are the early use cases that you're finding exciting right now?
Sure. So essentially, for anyone who's listening who's not sure what the MCP is, and you've probably seen it floating around on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you're getting your media these days, but it's essentially a connector that allows you to chat to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini about whatever you're connected to.
Right.
So we have built that over the last few weeks, and we released it probably 6-8 weeks ago at this point, and it's been definitely the most amount of positive product feedback we've ever gotten. Highest amount of referrals have come in the last couple of weeks as well. And I think what people are using it for is a second business brain. A lot of the metrics I've just spoken about, it will resonate with a lot of people listening to this podcast. But I guarantee you, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that are saying, "I don't fully understand those numbers. I don't know what all those metrics mean," and they feel there's like that's holding them back in business sometimes, and it's completely understandable. What's happening with the MCP is when we onboarded customers over the last couple of years, there was there was an enablement layer, an onboarding layer to educate the user, not just on how the product worked, but actually how all these numbers related with each other. So what the MCP has done is it understands all that context deeply. We built out a bunch of custom skills, which for anyone listening are essentially a prompt that you can use to get the most out of your StoreHero data in Claude. But the most powerful part is that people are asking questions in language that they understand, but getting extremely comprehensive language in layman's terms that breaks it down into a really clear and easy explanation as to why this happened. Some really interesting causational insight as to the relationship between different numbers. And obviously, most importantly, it's helping you make decisions as to what to do next to make your business more profitable.
It's interesting. Over the years, I think of some other kind of analytics tools like Grow or Glue, or there's other different ones that are out there for quite a while. And the challenge that they always had, and I think this MCP actually fixes a lot of this, is the fact that there was some default dashboards that were created for folks based on what they thought to be more generally acceptable use cases. But the reality was that every business is different in a lot of cases, or the team member that's kind of responsible for a certain area, they're forced to, there's quite a bit of energy and time to figure out dashboards to allow them to analyze data and make decisions on that data, which is interesting now with an MCP, because you're bringing in all of this data from both Shopify, the social channels, GA. I mean, who knows, all these different kinds of inputs coming in. Now you have this central repository of data, plus your own kind of underlying, kind of processes. And all of a sudden you can query against that and create artifacts instantly based on what you need in natural language. It's really a completely different departure than building dashboards of the past.
100%. And I think the proof needs to be in the pudding. Like, there's so much people who are, myself included, by the way, not too long ago, spending hours in Claude and everything's cool and it's shiny and it's fun, and then maybe nothing overly material coming out of it. The proof is in the pudding, I suppose, in terms of how we're actually seeing teams now use it. And I'll just give one quick example of a client I spoke with last week, and they essentially get their StoreHero profit scale report sent over to them each morning. It aligns with the forecast that they have. Their 30-minute kind of daily stand-up now is all around where we're on track and off track for every single number. And they're interrogating it. As an example, we missed on repeat customers. It's going in, it's understanding the Klaviyo flows, the campaigns that sent, the email signups, all that kind of thing. But she kind of told me that, look, we're less focused on individual metrics right now. And Claude has helped us understand the levers a lot better that improve those metrics. So just on the topic of dashboards and, maybe other tools of the past, it's very much changing from, we were in a world of spreadsheets, then we moved to dashboards, and now we've moved to AI. And I don't think the need has changed. Everybody's still trying to understand their business. It's the interface has obviously dramatically changed, particularly even in the last 6 months. So I think that's where I'm seeing the biggest change. Like that business in particular, that daily stand up now, that they're interrogating things they never would have looked into before. She also said to me that they feel incredibly more empowered to push back on their agencies. You know, everybody knows software like agencies. We're very focused. We're not necessarily aligned. We're not in the merchant's shoes every single day of the week like they are. And often we speak a slightly different language to them. Sometimes that could be intentional on the agency side. But what she told me was that, you know, we feel a lot more empowered to be able to push back on the agency in language that now they understand. And she said it's actually created a much better agency relationship overall with the clients directly, because the agency is delighted. The client is now up to speed, up to their level in terms of where they're, you know, how they're making decisions. And obviously the brand is obviously delighted because they have a much more deeper understanding of their business and actually what's driving it in the first place. And she kind of told me, you know, StoreHero used to be the place that we check every day to see how we were getting on, and now it's becoming, you know, almost the way work gets done. Like all their task list every morning for each member of the team is all a derivative of the daily stand up that they've gone through. And they've it's been the first month of the whole year this year. They've absolutely massively crushed their forecast on what was a previously bad year before. And she said that would have taken months to get to the level of insight that they've gotten to over the last couple of weeks. So for me, that was, you know, really encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting how that habit forming with a team member or team to go to Store Hero as a starting point every morning. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm in a media business, so like, I mean, I have a daily
Yeah.
planner, and I think about, hey, what's on my schedule? What the high value, eat the frog. What's the high value task for today that needs to get done? Obviously, today was newsletter release and podcast recording. So, I mean, I know what I have to do, and my source of truth is living in Claude right now. I could see how people would be in Store Hero because that is pretty much the pulse of the business. I want to make a slight pivot, and you made a good comment about the agency side, because I think there's a lot of agency partners and even some self-employed-ish kind of smaller partners that manage accounts. They could be managing just ad accounts or maybe overall strategy. I find it interesting that that you have an agency option available, and I can
Yeah.
see the long-term benefits of larger. I think Milk Bottle and a few others. I kind of researched a bit. It's interesting, some of these agency partners and how they're differentiating themselves and actually finding better clients because they're really positioning their offering. They're not necessarily saying that they're using Store Hero as the product, but they're positioning, and it's interesting the positioning that people have now, maybe to attract and retain better clients because now they have a better process. Can you talk a little about successful agency partners and kind of how they're utilizing your platform and the marketing side that goes from that? Because they don't need to know. It could be very white label that Store Hero is running the back end, but the front end, it makes the agency partner look like, this is a true business partner of ours.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's no secret. Like profitability in e-commerce is a huge, it's very topical. The challenge has always been over the last couple of years that it's some agencies and some brands have maybe found it difficult to get up to speed on what all the acronyms and numbers mean. And Claude is just completely, that's evaporated now. So it's table stakes. Every agency needs to understand this at this point in time. So you're right. Like we have actually a number of our agency partners were on this podcast not too long ago, including Matt from Sunnyside. Those guys are crushing it.
Love it.
But it's changed completely in that like brands going into agencies now, like if you think about it, like as a paid media buyer, whether you're in a brand or an agency, for most brands today, the heaviest line item of the whole P&L is the Meta and Google spend. So whoever's responsible for deploying that capital in the business is essentially the largest investor. And in a world where your margins are getting compressed, due to all the external factors we mentioned, brands are more conscious than ever that whoever is, whatever agency, whatever media buyer they're going to be working with, that person absolutely needs to be working from a foundation where they understand the commercial objectives of the business. In no other industry would the largest investor not be held to account from a financial standpoint each week, and contribution margin is the e-commerce equivalent of that. What we're seeing with the agencies using this, because they do use it in their pitches now, because it just, it's a massive conversion booster versus other agencies who won't be using it. But they're winning more business. They're holding on to clients. And, I actually got a small bit of pushback from an agency a number of months ago. They said, well, what if we plug this in and the client doesn't like the profit numbers? And I was like, well, have that conversation now because the churn is coming. You're just kicking the can down the road 6 months. Whereas some of the agencies who, surface maybe the numbers aren't great, Well, that's an honest and a transparent conversation up front. You become that figure domain expertise, not just in e-commerce and marketing, but also in their commercials and their business. And they're going to find that difficult to replicate if they go to another agency.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, well, that's really cool. I'm really glad you have that service available, and I'm glad there can be that positioning. I mean, end of the day, I think just honest feedback to your potential client. If you're an agency founder, I think makes complete sense. I just love that you because of the platform, you have all these different options, plain language, kind of like profit briefs almost, or just like
Yeah.
forecasting and goal pacing. This is very interesting to me that I don't think agency founders are using that sort of language at all, and because they're still a little bit stuck in 2022, 2023 dashboards and different things like that, and thinking more of just revenue and ROAS, which are important, but the profit first side of it, and then having all of these are like extra little slices that you can actually have in your marketing that can go out to the client and saying, oh, wow, you guys are different. You guys do things differently. I find that interesting. And
Yeah.
then they're more apt to acquire those customers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, look, it's just a conversion booster. It's just becoming table stakes. It's becoming much, much more of a conversation. When we started Store Hero back in 2022, trying to get anybody to talk about profit or care about it, was honestly
Yeah.
more trouble than I'd like to admit. But an increasingly difficult e-commerce environment, which there is out there today. It's just becoming table stakes to focus on. Again, just going back to that point, the signal that you build your business around is going to be the business that you build, and just making sure that you have the right North Star in the business is absolutely paramount. And I think in a world where, you touched on an interesting point there, Steve, in terms of, your media business, and you live in cloud every day.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I think that's where everybody's going to be living every day. Um, I really think so. And like right now, anybody can connect their Shopify and their Meta to Claude through an MCP.
Uh-huh.
But the challenge is that going to give you the right answers or in your actual economics? If you're pulling from multiple different data sources, what we're seeing happening is this hallucinations popping up. It
Yeah.
doesn't actually have all the
Mhm.
cost data in there. And, it's like giving someone almost a car but no fuel. How far is
Mhm.
it going to get you? Is it going to be reliable? And in a world where I think we're moving, like right now, we've moved from, as I said, the spreadsheets to the dashboard to, AI helping us make the decisions. We are very, very, very quickly moving to a world where those agents are going to start making more and more of those decisions on your behalf. And I just think it's absolutely critical for those agents to understand your costs, your margins, your forecast, so that the agent knows your economics. It knows when you're flying. It knows when you're crushing it. It knows when it needs to pull back, and it knows that it's not flying blind. And if it is flying blind, and you have an agent running your store, you are too.
Yeah. I think that's the advantage, I think, of your MCP versus maybe directly having an MCP to just paid media account or
Yeah.
just to Shopify or just to whoever, because not saying you have disparate data, but you're kind of like siloed in that. Not saying that data is bad, but it's just
No.
you're not seeing the full scope of like the whole entire business from a profit lens.
Exactly, and it's going to be lacking context over time. With spend increases or decreases or with margin changes. Whereas if it's in one place, the MCP, like we've done all the work over the last couple of years to, for us, actually, the AI part that we're doing with everybody now, that's actually the easy part.
Mm.
The hard part has been over the last 4 years building this rock solid ETL, fancy name for a very elaborate dashboard, database underneath that is combining the ecom marketing and finance. So Claude isn't necessarily going looking for all the data. It's almost just surfacing all the data that's already in that connector
Mhm.
quickly, accurately, and on time.
Yeah, I think the word on these, when you talk about these frontier models, you think about like Claude and OpenAI. It's interesting. What you're building is, I think the more technical term is more of a harness, which is on top of the large language. Let the model do what the model needs to do. It has its own internal baked in power, but it's the fact that you have this harness on top along with this MCP, which really makes the difference. And I think that's your kind of like superpower now.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. And I mean, just the numbers of terms of like our users that are using it, even like we've seen, we're modeling out, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the MCP stuff is new for us, and it's a really interesting time to be in this business.
100%.
Just with everything that's going on, but we're actually seeing like dashboard usage is like down from our power users by probably 70%.
Yeah.
But we can see that the tool calls within the MCP in terms of the overall usage versus what they're using in the dashboard is gone up by probably 5 or 6x, which is incredible for us to
Right.
see. So
Mm-hmm.
it's quickly becoming to a situation whereby, I think we're just chatting on this, but everybody's going to be living in Claude all day, every day. They're going to be asking you questions. Claude is going to become your business brain. Like, we have all your e-commerce, all your marketing. We've even started seeing brands throw some left field questions at it around, things we have never would have done in the past, like persona mapping. It just so happens the orders page that we have built that honestly nobody really looked at, because who's going to go through 10,000 orders from last month? Like, nobody. But it's actually a really perfect use case from Claude. It has timestamps on orders, cities, discount codes used, products that are purchased together. So the persona mapping it's able to do with that, when it can, causationally pull in GA4 and Search Console data to build up a really detailed persona map in terms of what your clients care about, what they search about, what they purchase, what time of the day or what time of the day of the week they purchase. It's becoming that business brain, and we're only really getting started in terms of what this is going to look like over the next couple of months.
I know, man. It's just wild. I'm glad we're chatting today. It's so interesting. I love being on the forefront of this technology. Another question for you. Or I always get warm and fuzzy when I hear like success stories of other brands and using different platforms and stuff. And I go to the website, I see there's a lot on here. Is there any? I mean, you don't have to specifically call out a certain particular business, or you can speak more anecdotally if you want. But is there any kind of merchant that you have worked with, and their life was a certain way, kind of pre StoreHero, and then implementing the platform, what great looks like to them today because they're a current client? And you can call them out specifically or just more anecdotally if you can think of anyone that you'd like to chat about.
Um, yeah. So there's the case study on our website. I won't name which one it is. But it was a brand we actually took on pretty early on, and
Okay.
it was actually more education. Like, it was like he was very much kind of, very much in the ROAS world, but had a great brand, was probably doing $2-3 million a year. And then we started working together. We got all his numbers plugged in, and I could see just highly overly efficient, which, is probably the best possible problem that you could have. So we kind of did a bit of education and understanding with what that signal piece, like, what is the signal that we're going to scale this business on, and where do we want to get to on it? He was very conscious that he didn't want to scale for the sake of scaling and end up in a cash flow hole or put himself out of business. He needed the business to be profitable and sustainable. Obviously, he didn't have any external capital on board or anything like that.
Right.
But the business today is at about 30 million. And I actually visited him last year in Australia, and he kind of told me about the big new houses after buying and the rest of it. And for me, that was incredible because, like, we were obviously not the reason he grew, but we were a massive part of the success story early doors in helping him reevaluate how aggressive or not aggressive to be at different times of the year. And for me, that was an incredible moment because we were a very small and scrappy startup. We are still to this day to some extent, but being able to see, the journey he went on over just changing his mindset and getting out of just looking at sales and return on ad spend every day, and more so looking at, profitability first and foremost. He was actually, even just to kind of give a quick explainer on it, what he was able to do was spend almost 10 times more money each month at a much worse ROAS than he had in the past. But the dollars that was spitting out at the end were infinitely higher than what he had going forward. He had a perception he needed to hit a certain ROAS target each month. And if he fell below that target, he would kind of pull back ad spend. And that sounds logical and reasonable, but it was actually the biggest blocker in getting him from A to B. Obviously, a phenomenal team there, a phenomenal product. You wouldn't get to that scale without that in the first place. However, there's hundreds of brands out there who are in that position. They do have a great product, and they're wondering why they can't scale and push on. And the main question I would just ask them is, like, what are you tracking each week? Does the North Star that you make investment decisions on, does that actually align with you being a profitable business? If it does, fantastic, keep doing it. If it doesn't, maybe just take a harder look at it and really understand, why are we optimizing to this number?
I see. Okay, that makes complete sense. Another question is around the connection to Shopify. I see you have a Shopify app, and so talk about that whole onboarding process that happens when someone downloads the app and installs it. what's going on in the background, and then what's step A, B, C, and D? Like what happens kind of post ingestion of data? I'd like to talk about that, and then let's talk about the sweet spot of merchant, because I see you have a free account or a free option available, and then we have a rate based on annual GMV, and you kind of scale up accordingly. So let's talk about the onboarding process and what people can expect, and then talk about pricing and sweet spot for client.
Sure. You can download it in the Shopify App Store. Just StoreHero is what you're going to search for there. Very quick and easy to onboard. We made a really hard kind of point of making the onboarding as easy as possible, because if you didn't make this platform completely frictionless to onboard, nobody would do it. So we do have you can onboard to Shopify literally with one click of a button. It then asks you to just authenticate and log into your Meta, Google, GA4, etc. Klaviyo accounts. So you can honestly get on board in about 5 minutes. It's not that hard.
Okay.
Typically, Shopify data will take about 24 hours to sync through, depending on the size of the store. Smaller stores, probably 4 or 5 hours. And then typically what we will do is we would generally jump on a call with every merchant just to go through and answer any questions. It works very well out of the box, but as anyone listening to this knows, their business is probably very different to every e-commerce business for some weird reason, but that's just across the board. So we just want to make sure that's done correctly. We've probably onboarded over 1,000 stores at this point. I won't say we've seen it all, but we've seen a lot. So we should, in 99.9% of cases, be able to find some workaround for if there's something that's just a little bit strange about your business compared to everybody else's.
Okay, very cool. And then as far as like pricing is concerned, and then the sweet spot of a merchant.
Sure. So yeah, we have a free tier on there just for all the marketing platforms. Some brands don't actually want the Shopify; they just want to be able to see all the marketing metrics in one place, and that's completely free.
Yep.
So with the pay plans, we do kind of two different models. One is software only. Obviously, there's full email support and everything like that with it. You see the Elite platform, Elite support is the second tier. So it's the exact same product for everybody.
Okay.
What we have found though is that a lot of clients really want us to almost act as a quasi consultant with them. Again, we've done thousands of these calls with clients, so we can generally see a lot of pattern recognition. And clients often just want us to be on the call with them, help us explain to them, what are you seeing in the market? How do we train our team up on this? How do we use it in a weekly meeting? That kind of thing. We do quite a bit of it on an onboarding anyway. We still do calls for everybody for onboarding if they want it. However, some clients want us to kind of stay on for another couple of months or even years in some case at this point to really act as a consultant and an extension of the team.
I see. Okay, very cool. One question I didn't ask, but I think is important, because you mentioned Klaviyo and whatnot. I always like to hear it from the founder about the intentionality around playing nicely with other pieces of technology. Because as you know, as being an MSN, that one of the first things we did when you got a new account was we go do an app audit and going, okay, why did you choose all of these? Let's talk about these from top to bottom. Instantly, there's an instant savings. So many times, I'm sure have this example too, where you go through it and you're like, okay, why are you using this forecasting tool here? Do you realize that thing is $500 a month? Oh, that person left the company. We don't even use that thing anymore. And it's so funny how quickly you can go through it. So there's the app audit side, or any kind of like even private injections into Shopify from like other sources and stuff. So what's your thought about the apps in general, and then playing nicely with your solution?
I think the vast majority of brands have far too many apps.
Yeah.
First,
True.
personally.
Yep.
Probably for the reasons you've just mentioned. And also Shopify is an incredible product. I mean, people don't have time to look at editions every year, but a lot of what they're paying for is probably being released in editions. Not all of this, but absolutely, that's becoming more and more the case.
Yeah.
From an integration standpoint, in terms of how we play with other apps, if it makes sense to integrate, like we're kind of evaluating now at the moment, bringing in supports and reviews to essentially enrich Claude. We want to be able to give Claude the absolute maximum amount of data at all times. So I think those two would be probably the next on the list in terms of what we want to bring in next. We're kind of looking at stuff in a couple of different areas, which we'll probably hear about in due course over the next couple of weeks as well. But generally, if it makes sense, like we wouldn't be integrating an add to cart app as an example. It just doesn't necessarily directly fit with what we're doing each week. But if we think it's going to enrich the data set in StoreHero already, it's definitely on the table and something that we would probably like to bring in.
Ah, lovely. Well, this is really cool. So, what do you believe are some of the next steps then? So like I said, there's a lot of, there's the free option available. So there's, these are like the early starting brands, like maybe brands that are just kind of starting to get some product market fit. Maybe that's the easy way. They can try it, get their ad platforms connected. For those that are kind of firmly in the mid-market to enterprise, which I think seems to be more of your wheelhouse just because of the amount of data that you have, and the incrementality that can happen because of a large amount of data and current ad spend on social, and then putting in, all your cogs and different details in. What do you believe the kind of the next steps are for those that are listening? I understand that you may even want to offer a special promotion for my listeners.
Absolutely. And yeah, for anybody still listening to this podcast, absolutely thank you very much. And I hope you've enjoyed it and got something out of it. If you're interested in learning more, we're going to offer a 20% lifetime discount for essentially anybody who comes on a call with us and just mentions if they listen to this podcast, or just even email us with the word Fastlane.
Yeah.
On top of the 20% discount, we're going to do a free AI training session for you and your team, give you a bit of under the hood as to what we're working on, what we're seeing in the market, and even to the point we were touching on before the call, Steve, around workflows and habits. How do you make sure that your team is aligned with using AI on a weekly basis, not just to look at numbers, but to make decisions and to improve results?
This is amazing. Thank you so much for that. I really massively appreciate it. It's funny, you can't see a video right now, and I joke on the show if you listen to my episodes, but I always have like how many pages of notes that I take while I'm chatting with somebody. And like I said, I'm more than 2 pages. I actually went onto my daily planner page and wrote a few things down. So it's been a great episode. Like, I've learned a lot. I think you're building something really impactful. I want to thank my friend Adam Finan, who's a friend of yours, who's current MSM. He's the one that kind of made the warm introduction today. I want to shout out to him for introing me to you and kind of what you're building. I think it's a really neat product. I think it's really, and I love the fact that you're progressive enough to say that no, habits are changing as it relates to these frontier models. If you're a ChatGPT user or if you're a Claude user, it's interesting that you have an MCP now that, and I know it's iterating, but it's interesting. That's where a lot of the use cases are coming, plus the platform itself. And I think you're building something really, really neat and very impactful. I just want to thank you for coming on the show and offering this free AI training and the 20% off. It's been very, very eye-opening for me, and I really want to wish you continued success in your business.
Massively appreciate your time, Steve. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on.
All right. Have yourself a great afternoon. Well, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank you personally for being a loyal listener of E-commerce Fastlane. It's my hope that this podcast is offering you a ton of value through growth strategies, tactics, and exclusive insider tips on the best Shopify apps and marketing platforms, all with my personal goal to help you build, manage, grow, and scale a successful and thriving company powered by Shopify. Thanks for investing some time today and listening to the show. I'm so proud and excited that you have a growth mindset and are a constant learner. I truly appreciate you and your entrepreneurial journey. Enjoy the rest of the week and keep thriving with Shopify.